morning, fellow Toastmasters, guests. Today is my fourth speech, and I'm still sitting there each week trying to work out exactly what it is that I should talk about. I sit there and I agonise over it for ages. I'm sure that you're all very good at selecting it. You go off and you look on the internet, there's got these sites where we talk about 2,000 different speech topics that you can take to Toastmasters, and they're all rubbish. Well, none of them appeal to me. So this week I received some really interesting information in an email about a wind turbine. I thought that'd be great. I'll tell people how to make a wind turbine. And I started reading through it. It looks really exciting, and I couldn't quite. I thought about props and what have you, and I just couldn't quite see how I could do it. So my mind turned to more controversial things, as it does. I thought I could talk about sex, religion, politics. Can you imagine the props? But no, I decided to calm down. So today I'm going to tell you about bomb making. Now, bomb making is always an interesting one because it's something I don't really know a lot about, or at least I didn't before I started researching for this. It's something you hear coming up quite frequently, or at least you used to hear coming up quite frequently, maybe they just don't move in those circles anymore, about the reasons why we shouldn't have free speech and we shouldn't have the internet. And I confess that I'm not really big on censorship, and so I tend to work on the basis that most of the people who say, hey, we should censor this piece of information or that piece of information, are working from the position that they'll be quite happy to censor other people just as long as they get to do the censorship. Nobody really wants to be censored for themselves. And so I'm poo-poo, don't really mind about it. So I went off and did some research on the internet. Thought, okay, how much bomb-making information is there out there? And I was actually really surprised just how much bomb-making information there is on the internet, and how you can make bombs out of stuff which is freely accessible to me or the average 14-year-olds. And some of these sites make it look really cool, which is a bit scary. So I went off and I did myself a Google search, and I started by putting in the words bomb making. Before I did that, I put the browser onto private search mode. I thought about it, I thought, right.
You've been monitored by now.
If I was to tell my wife that I had licensed terrorist tendencies that I was hiding behind, I want to talk to her about Toastmasters, it would be an interesting topic. Would she be more likely to wear it that way, or would she be much more comfortably browsing for Swedish pornography? By the way, I think I've got my next topic to talk about. I've got a good reason. You know, darling, it's not what you think. The browser history, I just needed to be able to tell people about positions. So, I started off by putting it into on private browser mode. It also occurred to me that just because you put your browser on private mode doesn't mean that other people can't see exactly what you're searching for. And I'm thinking about these people buried away in caves who are going to be looking, oh, that guy over there, he's looking about contact explosives. And I was thinking that if I start seeing people at the top of my driveway with dark glasses and cars that I don't understand, or friendly tax audits, and if there are any terrorist activities in Glenfield Mall over the next few months, then I could be in trouble. The first search that I did told me how to make pipe bombs. Now, to make a pipe bomb, it's really easy. Let me tell you how to make a pipe bomb. What you do, hang on, you're a bit shifty. I'm not sure if you can be given this information. You start off with a 4-inch piece of copper tube, and you either use a vice, or on the internet they're talking about using a hammer, which sounds a bit scary, and you close off one end of it. You then get yourself about 10 packets of matches and a pair of scissors, and you chop off the ends of the matches, and you put each of the match ends into the tube. Once you've done that, you then want to close off the other end of the tube. This is where it gets tricky. A couple of things. Firstly, you don't want more than about a quarter of an inch worth of air left after you've unclosed the end of the tube. And if you happen to be hammering it, be really careful not to let one of the match ends underneath the bit which has been crimped off, because you might lose your hand. This is stuff which is interesting. So I was sitting there, and I mean, there's these big signs right up the front that was talking about how this stuff is, it can be very fun, but it's something which can be very dangerous. Please be very careful. I'm saying, that's interesting. And it occurred to me that when I was about 13 or 14, my father, who was a budding chemist in his teens, he used to tell me these wonderful stories about how he had made this chemical substance which, when you mixed it up, it was completely stable when it was dry. Sorry, when it was wet, but when it dried, it explodes on contact. So you can touch it, and it goes bang in a fairly exciting sort of way. And he was telling stories about how he painted it onto schoolmates' bicycle seats, which I thought was and also he had this really amusing story about how they got the science teacher, or maybe it was some other teacher, and it painted, he and his mates had painted the area between the teacher's desk and the blackboard. I think they were looking as a kind of deterrent, you know, if the teacher can't get to the blackboard, then the classes will be that much more interesting. Anyhow, my internet searching, about 2 to 3 minutes of internet searching tells me that I'm pretty sure, and at the time, as you can imagine, I begged my father, what's this stuff? What's it called? How do you make it? Because it sounded like something I wanted to do. He'd never tell me, surprise, surprise. 2 to 3 minutes worth of searching on the internet tells me that the substance he made was almost certainly ammonia triiodide. And you can make it. How did you lose your leg? Still some of it left. And you can make that by mixing together ammonia that you can get from the supermarket and iodine crystals. Both things which I can easily get hold of as called the age 14. My son's 9. I got interested in computers and got seriously interested in programming stuff when I was 8. My son so far uses the internet for homework, and he uses it for game walkthroughs. What's he going to be using it for when he's 20? I don't know. I started researching this topic thinking very much about great ways to deter Jehovah's Witnesses. Let's be honest. I also had memories of my father's stories when I was a boy. Now that I look at it and I see what's out there, I still don't like censorship. I still think the internet's a wonderful idea. Now, as a parent, I am sitting there and I have some sympathy for people out there who do feel differently from the way I do. So, the question which I'd leave you with, because it's one I've had to ask myself as part of this, is exactly how much information should be allowed? And are there ever any times when we do want to restrict?